We're going to start with some numbers. What do I mean by numbers? You. Let's talk about you. You and some numbers. You need a lot of energy. I mentioned this last video, but like most warm-blooded top predators, you use a lot of energy. Case in point, a human that's 60 kilograms uses about 2,300 kilocalories a day. Right? Kilocalorie, it's like, a way to measure food calories. You've heard those, right? Counting calories. It's a way of measuring energy. A dog that's about the same size is going to take 2,100 kilocalories, which turns into 10,000 kilojoules and 8,800 kilojoules per day. That's quite the difference. And yet, you and the dog are the same size. What's going on here? It's our brains. 20% of all the energy you eat goes to make that thing work. That's why you're tired at the end of the day. Well, that and the lack of sleep most days. This brain of ours takes a ton of energy to run, and that's tricky. Our complex brains are capable of many amazing things, such as, for example, learning. But that requires a lot of food to make it work. In our quest for food, we have developed an amazing technology, but the biggest one is good old farming. We have been part of a several thousand-year experiment to see if farming is a good idea or not. Before that, our ancestors used to do that whole hunter-gatherer thing, roving around, hunting animals, gathering food, and it worked out fine for literal thousands of years. Millions, actually, depending on how far back you want to really look. But we decided to try farming a couple thousand years ago, and everything that's come since from that. Thanks to farming, humans were able to settle and start shaping the environment around them to suit ourselves. But our ancestors were very aware of how their survival depended on careful managing of limited resources. If you have a feast one year, you get a famine the next year, and nobody likes a famine, even if everybody likes a feast. This focus on sustainability was normal the world over until we hit the Industrial Revolution. That's pretty recent, 1800s, give or take. Suddenly, machines could be built to do the work of people, and those machines needed resources. Colonies extracted those resources, and the world seemed limitless. I need more resources. What do? I sail further down the coast, and I make a new colony, and I take their resources. Problem solved. I don't have to worry about being sustainable. I can just take. Why save at home when you can just take from abroad? We have now reached the edge of our world. There is no more land to colonize. Not to mention the whole fact that the people living there would rather you didn't colonize them. Thank you very much. What we have is all we get, and we must preserve or we must perish. On the plus side, we have our clever brains that can help solve these problems. So let's take a look at some examples. A sustainable ecosystem is one that we consider to be stable. If it is stable, that means that the cycling of biotic, living, and abiotic, non-living, material has reached a balance. And that balance will allow it to continue forever. Forever. Or almost forever. In our quest to get enough food, humans have reshaped environments, breaking old balances and introducing new ones. Here's two examples. You got the prairie, where we live, broadly speaking, and a farm, where we grow food. These two occupy the same basic geographic space, but how do they behave is going to be different. The prairie. Primary producer is going to be a mix of grasses, a dozen different varieties and versions. The soil is regenerated because some plants can renew the nitrogen in the soil. What that means, we'll see more as we go further in the unit, but it'll keep track of it for later. Nitrogen is necessary for life. The primary consumers are going to be things like grasshoppers, bison, mice, prairie dogs. The secondary consumers will be foxes and owls and blackbirds and humans, because, we could wander around this place. We could eat some of these grasses and animals and stuff. That's allowed. Pest control, I say none there, but that's not true. Pest control is done by the other animals, right? Like, okay, there are grasshoppers. Maybe those are pests. They're eating all the grass. What's going to happen? You're going to get more blackbirds, and the blackbirds will eat the grasshoppers, right? They'll balance each other out through natural processes. As there's too much of one, the other one will rise to reach that same level and to eat them. So this prairie has a balance to it that will maintain itself over decades and centuries. take a look at the farm. The primary producer is a single type of grass, a monoculture they call it. Mono meaning one. We saw that. And it's going to be something like, say, wheat. I mean, it could be something other than wheat, but we're going to say that it's wheat. The soil is regenerated by the farmers adding fertilizer to the soil. Now, in the old days, again, as we're going to see in the future of this course, in the old days, fertilizer would have been stuff like bat guano or animal feces, aka poop, because it's got a lot of nutrients in it that we couldn't digest, but that the plants can then make use of. Now, instead, in the 19th century, so only about 100 years ago, we figured out how to make chemical fertilizers, which we can now add to any soil to make it work quite well. But we'll talk more about that and fertilizers and all that kind of stuff later on. The primary consumer, of course, is going to be humans, right? Like that's why we grow the food, so we can eat it. But there's also going to be things like locusts or grasshoppers. Those are considered pests by us because we don't want them to eat our food, thank you very much. We grew that for us, not for them. The secondary consumer, there basically isn't any. Any other animal that tries to wander onto our field, we chase them off, right? We put up fences. We try to scare them away. We put up scarecrows specifically to scare away other animals. Why? Because again, it's our food. Get away from it. Pest control, the farmers add insecticides, which is just a fancy way to say poison. Insecticide, the insect part means bug. The aside part means poison or killer. So an insecticide kills bugs. A herbicide kills plants, or weeds, as we usually call them when we don't want them. Okay, so what do we see with these two? Well, under ideal circumstances, both of these are technically stable. But the moment humans stop maintaining the farm, it will collapse, right? If I don't add the fertilizer, if I don't chase off the pests, if I don't plant the wheat, it's not a farm anymore. So because the farm requires human effort, we tend to say that this is unstable or unsustainable. Now, again, so long as the farmer's there doing this thing, it'll work. The farmer can keep farming generation after generation, but only so long as they do the work. So we classify that as unsustainable because the humans have to put in the effort. We prefer things where humans don't have to put in effort, as do you guys. Mostly, can I just learn all of this without practicing? If you figure that out, let me know. Now, there are other subtle issues with these two ecosystems that speak to the complexity of balance. Oh, remember I said it's not about just easy answers. There's complexity here. Locusts are pests on farms because they eat crops that people grow. Because they're insects, a bug, they are very hard for people to deal with, and so we use pesticides, bug poison, as already mentioned. The strange thing about locusts is that they're just grasshoppers. When too many grasshoppers live in one place, they change. They become more aggressive and hungry. It's a strange phenomenon, a behavior with how grasshoppers behave in groups. Think of it as like, you know, a couple people, pretty calm, a mob of people can get a little aggressive. On a prairie, this almost never happens. That's not totally true. It does happen, but it's much rarer because other animals eat the grasshoppers and keep their population in check. Okay, a little bit of an exaggeration there, but they do keep them in check a lot more. So when the locust swarm does happen, it takes longer. This isn't as true on a farm where farmers scare off most of the other animals, which means human actions are creating problems that we then have to solve through more complex and costly methods. If we let the blackbirds hang out in the fields, they'd eat the grasshoppers. We wouldn't need to go with some insecticide to kill them. Does that mean that we shouldn't scare away the blackbirds? Well, blackbirds can also eat wheat. This is going to be a running theme. Human solutions are less efficient because we do not fully understand what we are doing. However, the more we learn, the better our solutions become. It's not as easy as just saying, let the blackbirds hang out in the fields. They'll eat the grasshoppers because they'll also do other things that we don't want. But at the same time, what do we do? What's the solution? Well, we don't know. We need to do more study to understand. The more we understand this, the easier it will be for us to be able to do something effective, to do something that is going to accomplish what we want, but not be super costly, super complicated, or super dangerous, or even better, not have other effects that we don't want to have to deal with later. In ignorance, we will make mistakes that we think are correct. And to be honest, you guys do this all the time. If I give you a test and I'll ask you a question, you'll be like, I totally think I know the answer here. And you write it down and you hand it in. And I look at that and go, no, guys, that's not how that works. You're thinking of this the wrong way. We saw this a lot with physics, right? Where I would tell you constantly, you would give me the right answer to the wrong question because you'd misunderstand two types of graphs. This idea is writ large across the human experience. If we understand something, we can move with better agency. We can be more effective. We don't cause secondary side effects. But that kind of understanding is hard because the world is a big and complicated place with so many moving parts that it's difficult to keep track of everything. But you're learning, and that's the important part. The more you learn, the more all of us learn, the more we can make decisions that will actually work well. As we saw in our farm versus field example, a more diverse ecosystem has advantages by being more flexible. When one part of the system slides out of balance, the other parts are able to correct it. We call this biodiversity. This is why ecosystems like the Arctic are fragile, because there are only a few organisms that fill an entire niche. Remember that word niche, right? It's a type of organism or a thing that's filling a certain type of style of play, as it were. The Arctic is fragile. It's got very few animals that live up there because, broadly speaking, it's pretty inhospitable. No one really wants to go up there if they don't have to. The prairie has a lot more. A forest or jungle might have even more. A farm has very few, so again, it's very fragile. Heck, you could say that humans are a keystone species on a farm. One farmer has a big effect on that entire farm. There's a good example for you. So let's explore how small changes can affect an ecosystem through this lake. Okay? So you should see this one in your book, but we've got a food web here that's interconnecting a whole bunch of different animals and organisms here. All of them, of course, eating each other in a nice balanced ecosystem. So let's take a look here. To begin with, all living organisms need three basic things to survive. Three things. Come on, you know this. You know this. Come on, you know. Okay, yes. You got it. Food, water, and shelter, as we see here, right? We got ourselves some food, some water, and some shelter. Now, obviously, this is a human shelter, not necessarily a cat shelter, or, well, okay, actually, it would be a cat. Cats live in homes. What am I saying? Bad example. Probably not a shelter for a blackbird or a grasshopper. We will also have to sort the organisms into trophic levels. Okay, now I'm going to show, I have the answers. I'm going to put the answers up. I want you to do it. I want you to go back at the other slide, right? Take a look here. You've got this information in your book. I want you to look at this, and I want you to sort it. I am delaying right now. I am stalling for time while you sort this. Pause the video and sort it. Okay, I hope you've done so. Here we go. Boom. The water lily, the rice, and the pondweed are all producers. They're all those autotrophs. Auto meaning automatic. The red-winged blackbird, the mosquito, the minnow, the moose, those all count as your primary consumers because they can eat plants. See, there's that blackbird eating plants. That's why we don't want it on the farm. The bullfrog, the loon, the snapping turtle, the dragonfly, and the northern pike eat these guys here. Now, obviously, this pyramid that we're setting up doesn't tell you the immediate relationship, so you probably don't assume that the bullfrog right here eats the moose over here, right? That doesn't seem very likely. But that's not the purpose of this particular chart here. It doesn't show you the relationships, it just shows you the broad levels. And lastly, the eagle and the human. And to be fair, we could knock the eagle down a spot if we ate the eagle too. Just saying. Okay, how would removing the wild rice affect the red-winged blackbirds? Food source, water source, or shelter? Right? Those are the three things we need. So there are three possible ways that I could affect this organism, not just the food way, although the food way is a pretty big one. Okay, so let's take a look. The wild rice is a food source for the red-winged blackbird, so the removal will make it harder for the organism to get food. The wild rice is also a shelter for the blackbird, so the removal will make it harder for the organism to build nests. Okay, this one here, the top one here, is pretty obvious. This is like, okay, elementary school kid looks at the picture and goes, oh, yeah, rice to blackbird. If there's no rice, the blackbird doesn't have any food. That's bad. This is a little more subtle. This one isn't as obvious, right? Like, oh, they got lots of food, but they have no shelter. They can't make a nest. You've got all the food you want, but you don't have a bedroom. It's not going to be great. I mean, it's not the end of the world, right? You're not going to like immediately, but still not going to be great. Did it have any effect on the water? Not really. Not really. So that one's easy. Would the population of red-winged blackbirds increase or decrease? Okay, well, we just put two stressors, on the red-winged blackbird. If I say that too many times fast, I'm going to have a tongue twister here. Can we say that that's going to increase or decrease the population? Well, if it's a bad thing, generally it decreases the population. So that's what we're going to see here. The loss of shelter and food would put a pressure on the red-winged blackbird, causing the decrease in their population. Pretty straightforward, really. If it's bad, there's less of them. How would removing the wild rice affect the mosquitoes? Okay, this is a little bit more further away, right? Let's take another look at the picture here. Oh, got to go quite far. The mosquitoes are here. Oh, that's the dragonfly. Mosquitoes are there. The wild rice is over here. Those are not directly connected. So it's not a food thing. Okay, so what's going on? Well, again, think about the food, think about the water, think about the shelter. I want you to think about it. Try it. Do it. Come on. Figure it out. How is there an effect? And remember, you might have to trace the effect through multiple organisms because it's not just as easy as one-to-one. You're not in elementary school anymore. You can do a little bit more. Okay, I've stalled enough. Let's take a look. The wild rice is a source of shelter for the mosquitoes, so the removal will make it harder for the organism to build nests. Okay, in this case, nests is probably not necessarily the right way to describe that, but the wild rice allows the mosquito to hide. And it can hide its larvae in the water among the reeds, so it's harder to find them, so they're less likely to get eaten. So that shelter is going to be pretty important. The red-winged blackbird population is on the decline because there's no rice, we said that last time, which means that there are less predators hunting the mosquitoes. Because they can't get enough of the other food, the birds have to leave. What does that mean? The mosquitoes have got free rein when they hatch next year because there's nothing to eat them. Would the population of mosquitoes increase or decrease? Well, once again, it's a little bit trickier, right? Like, okay, one of these, they won't have as much room to build nests, have places to hide, but they also have less predators, so that's less obvious. It kind of depends which one of these is going to be more extreme. The loss of shelter would encourage a decrease in population, while the lack of predators would encourage an increase. Given mosquitoes are hunted by many organisms, the loss of shelter might be more damaging than the loss of one predator. If this is true, the population will decrease. Notice if. We don't know. I haven't done enough experiments. I haven't collected enough data. We haven't checked exactly how many other organisms there are. This is a guess, but it's an educated guess, and that's okay. We don't always have the right answer, but we need to be able to make a logical conclusion from what we're reading. Based on what we see and the fact that the mosquitoes are hunted by more than one predator, it makes logical sense that the loss of a hiding place would be more damaging. It's not perfect, though, but it's a good idea. Okay, what would happen to the dragonfly population in all this situation? Okay, another one for you to think about. Come on, connect the dots together, look at the web, figure out how these all work together. Heck, let's head back. Oh, so far. Too far. So the dragonfly is right here. Pretty easy. It's directly connected to the mosquito and the bullfrog here, right? Okay, that's pretty easy. So what is we saying about the dragonfly? The loss of shelter would encourage a decrease in the population, while an ease of hunting would encourage an increase. Once again, the dragonfly has nowhere to sit, nowhere to land, nowhere to hide. But it's got an easier time catching all those mosquitoes because they got nowhere to sit or nowhere to hide either. Given the mosquitoes are hunted by many organisms and their populations are on the decline as a result, again, we're assuming from last slide that we had the right idea, the extra competition might be a problem for the dragonflies. So they might have an easier time catching the mosquitoes, or conversely, they might have more competition from other organisms. If that's true, the population is going to decrease because of a range of different factors here, right? But again, to know for certain, we'd have to do some experiments. We'd have to take some measurements, get some numbers, figure how many organisms of each there are, how many mosquitoes the dragonflies can catch, if it's a difference between what they could catch before and what they could catch now. And let me tell you, doing experiments on animals, that's hard. They don't cooperate. I mean, you guys barely cooperate at the best of times, but if I have to make an experiment on an animal that I can't also yell at, what's going to happen? I'm going to be like, hey, could you please sit still for 5 minutes so I could set up the equipment to measure everything? And the dragonfly's going to be like, bzz. Like, what's going to... So it's tricky, is what I'm saying, all right? And that's one of the reasons why getting information about ecology is hard. What would happen to the snapping turtle population? Okay, same thing. Connect the train of dots together, figure out the logic, shelter, water, food. Although realistically, water hasn't come up very much. It's mostly been shelter and food. So what do we get? The turtles would lose shelter from the loss of rice. Once again, if there's not a bunch of plants to hide in, I'm losing shelter. Turtles don't eat mosquitoes, but frogs do. And if the population of mosquitoes drops, so will the population of frogs. This will mean that turtles have less to eat. If both of these things are true, it makes sense that the population would decrease. So I take away the wild rice, and suddenly the number of turtles disappears. And those are not immediately connected. But as you can see, each piece of this chain fits this logical idea. Complex problems require you to be able to think through what's happening. Okay, broadly speaking, the removal of one species can have a large impact on an ecosystem. It can lead to a domino effect, or what they call a trophic cascade. Cascade meaning something that falls, like a waterfall will cascade. A trophic level, remember that's the levels of the pyramids, so what we're saying is that we're going to have a collapse of everything down through the ranks, affecting one thing after another, after another, after another, as the whole ecosystem has to rebalance itself. If the ecosystem is sturdy enough, it can survive this. It can rebalance, everything will be fine. If not, the dominoes will start to fall, and then as they do, everything could get wiped out. As we could see, the removal of any one organism can have a big effect on all others, both directly and indirectly. Because removing organisms is a big deal, scientists have special words to describe exactly what is happening. These words line up on a continuum, a rainbow, from one end to the other, where things are okay or things are not okay. Here are our 4 words. You got on the far side, extinct. On the far side over here, you got vulnerable. In the middle, you've got threatened and endangered. Each one of these is related to a certain, basically, level of number of creatures, we'll say, about how well the creatures are doing overall. So extinct means the species is found, no longer found anywhere. It is gone. It is done. You probably do not have a pet Tyrannosaurus Rex at home. Probably. Like maybe a little toy one, but a real one? Probably not. That's the whole plot of Jurassic Park, right? Endangered. The species is close to extinction. There's only a few of them left, and it won't be long until they're gone. Threatened. The species is likely to become endangered. So, okay, basically what we're saying is, like, on the far side here, things are really, really bad. They're gone. Here, they're close to gone. Here, they're close to being gone. It's a continuum, okay? Vulnerable. The species is declining in number, meaning that it's not looking so rosy right now, okay? Right now, obviously, we would love if we could make a certain pandemic extinct. Right? That'd be good. Right now, it's not even vulnerable, but we'll get there eventually. There is one other option that doesn't quite fit on this list. It's called extirpated. That means the species is no longer found in only one area. So that's where, like, for example, you can't find a particular organism here, right? But you can find it somewhere else. Here they are again. So extinct, the species is gone. So for example, the blue walleye. This is a Manitoba example. We used to have a fish called the blue walleye. You cannot buy it anymore. It is gone. Probably because we ate it all. All right, probably not because we ate it all, but something ended up happening. Endangered, a species that is close to extinction in all parts of Canada or in a significantly larger location, such as the eastern cougar. It's a cougar, it's a type of cat that you can't see in the east because it's gone or almost gone. Threatened, any species that is likely to become endangered if factors that make it vulnerable are not reversed, such as, for example, the wood bison that live in forests or small forests. Vulnerable, any species that are at risk because of low or declining numbers, on the fringe of the range or in some restricted areas, the gray fox. We have trouble with gray foxes. Extirpated, locally extinct. So, for example, the grizzly bear. There are no grizzly bears around here. You can find them if you go further west, but there used to be them here too. Not anymore. There are other types of bears, and the grizzly bears are not totally gone, but they've basically been pushed out of our local area. So there we go. Species at risk. Talked about biodiversity. We've tied it all together with about how extinction can affect an ecosystem. I want you guys to take a look at the next couple of pages. There's some reading for you to do with some example questions that I'd like you to tackle. They should be pretty quick. Won't take you very long at all. And once you're done that, you're ready for the next thing, invasive species. That'll be next video. I'll see you guys next time.